Welcome to Performance Upgrades. I'm your host, Dave Moss. This show is brought to you by SportBikeWrench.com. Performance parts and professional advice. We're back with our project GSX-R750. Today what we're going to do is work with some Galfer brakes. We've chosen their 1300 series, which is their track and race, for many different reasons. It's a double H compound, which really works well under high heat. And when you're braking on the track, obviously your intensity and duration of braking is significantly longer. They also have a white ceramic backing on the pad, which controls a lot of the heat that goes into the brake caliper itself, through then to your brake fluid, so your brake fluid doesn't get quite so hot. And also it's got excellent initial bite, where as soon as you apply the pads, you can start to feel the braking force right away. So we're excited to try these. Now, in order to do that, obviously, we have to get rid of our pads that are on the bike currently and replace them with these. So we'll walk you through how to change brake pads on the Suzuki GSX-R750. First thing for us to do is to use our Motion Pro T-handle. Go ahead and loosen the brake pad pins. We know they're threaded, there's no clips, so we can just loosen these. Next, let's go ahead and remove the bolts from the caliper housing completely and put those down on the bench. Now that the caliper's loose, we're going to pull that out, put it into our hands, take the Motion Pro T-handle, and then remove both pins holding the pads in place. But you need to push on the pads a little bit to detension those pins. Next point of business, just quite simply remove the brake pads themselves. Make sure that you go ahead and clean the brake pins. You can use a Scotch-Brite pad or emery cloth and then inspect them. And we can see here we're starting to get flat spots on the pins where the brake pad has got caught and hung up. So after this next pad change, I'm going to go ahead and replace these pins. If these become a flat spot, your brake pads will hang up and you will lose braking performance, so that's not good. So always inspect them first. Before you put the new Galfer pads in, make sure that your brake pistons are equal in terms of distance sticking out from each side of the caliper. It's really important. You don't want one pad halfway out and the other one flat. That way when you put everything in and you go ahead and push your brake lever, the pistons will be centered. Also, you need to check if your pistons are clean. Ours are very clean, we just did the job recently. You don't want to be putting brand new pads in with filthy pistons, so if you need to do it, refer to the brake cleaning video that we have provided. Whenever you're changing pads and you get ready, as we are now, to install the new pads, make sure you're wearing gloves. You don't want to get oil off your skin on any of the brake material whatsoever. We're going to install our Galfer pads exactly as they came out of the packet. Sometimes you'll have backing plates on your stock brakes, sometimes you won't. But we're just going to install the pads as they were shipped directly from Galfer. Keep your pads together in one hand, gently slot them inside and make sure they sit properly. And when you push on them, they should spring a little bit, which means they're correctly seated. Next, to reinstall your brake pins, you're going to have to push on the pad against that spring to make sure that the pin goes all the way through, and you want to check as you push the pin that the pads stay correctly positioned until the thread touches. There's one. Now to the back. See, the pin won't go any further. Push on the pads all the way through until the threads seat. Now we'll take our Motion Pro T-handle, tighten up, or make snug at least the brake pad pins. Now that we have the pins snug, hand tight, we can see that everything is centered here. You can see in the middle of the caliper where the hole is. It pretty much lines up with our brake pads running all the way down the middle on both ends. That means we're centered, and that's really, really important to get that done now before you put your caliper back in place. So now we're ready to go. Now all we have left to do is put the brake bolts back in, torque everything, the bolts and the pins to spec. We're done with this side. we just quite simply do the same thing again on the other side. Now that our pads are installed, before you do anything else, pump your brake lever until you get brake pressure. There. Now we know that the pads are seated correctly against the rotor. Things to bear in mind. 1, break the pads in carefully. With any new pad, you want to follow the recommendations by the manufacturer to do that. And in this instance, we'll ride around the paddock, we'll drag the brakes a little bit, get some heat into them. Then we'll go out in a session for 20 minutes and we'll use the brakes lightly. And then in the third session, we'll use them heavily and break the pads in. Personally, I will also, in every case when I'm changing pads, sand the rotors down with some emery cloth, about 600 grit, because I want the new pad material to seat properly to the rotor. It's a little bit of a pain, but it's worth every second when you do that, especially for the track use. So as always, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Performance Upgrades.